panelists with us today. We have Julie Sanders from Home and Design Magazine, who is a great NARI member and our media sponsor. We have June Stanich from June Stanich Photography and Greg Hadley from Hadley Photography. And they are here today just to help you better understand some of the tips and tricks that they use. And then Julie, of course, from Home and Design Magazine, some of the strategies that goes into choosing those cover photos and the photos that they do use in the magazine, and what may take a great project but eliminate it from the magazine, or have another picture that may not be quite as amazing of a project, but they've done a really nice job of adding in those elements that they need. So we're excited to see what they have for us today. So Julie, I'm going to let you, first of all, can I ask everybody to do me a favor? In the upper right hand corner, will you click on speaker view? There you go. And then, Julie, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over sharing and introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do and your magazine.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I am Julie Sanders, Senior Editor at Home and Design and editor of Home and Design's annual idea book. I've been on staff at H&D for more than 12 years, and I pretty much wear every hat, from writing and editing to proofing and looking for projects, as does the rest of our tiny editorial division. One of my favorite parts of the job is reviewing potential projects. I never get tired of seeing beautiful spaces that have been beautifully photographed. In fact, great photography is really what powers our magazine. Today, I'll be talking about what you need to know to submit magazine-worthy photographs, and I'll share some pictures that illustrate what to do and what not to do. But first, here's how it works at H&D. Industry pros like architects, interior and landscape designers, and remodelers generally approach us with projects they'd like to showcase. In fact, we're usually swamped with submissions, which is certainly an enviable position to be in. We also welcome submissions from photographers who, with permission from their clients, will send photos of projects they've shot that they think will be a good fit for us. Frequently, the projects we receive have already been professionally shot, and this is a great scenario for us. It makes it easy to determine the strength of a project visually and to visualize how it'll work in a layout. However, scouting shots are also welcome. If we decide to use a project based on scouting shots, we'll hire a photographer to do the shoot. In those cases, at least pre-COVID, our art director will be present to direct the shoot, and we will ask the designer to stage it. For print purposes, every image should have a resolution of 300 dpi and should measure minimally 8 by 10 inches for vertical shots and 16 by 10 for horizontals, in case we want to use them as two-page spreads. We like a mix of vertical and horizontal images, and you might want to shoot some vertical images with cover potential in mind. Next, our preferences for submissions. Whether you're sending scouting shots or professional ones, we like to see all the photography you have, or at least a large sampling. But please send low-res versions, as high-res images can be unwieldy. If the project is a remodel or a redesign, include before shots if possible. Not only are they useful for writing and layout purposes in helping us understand a space, but they also allow us to consider whether a project will work as a before and after feature in our remodeling section. Please take your before pictures in high res and try for angles that'll match the ones you'll take after, and take many of them so we have a lot to choose from. I'd also like to say a word about style. Home and Design is interested in high-end, luxurious, and innovative projects, and those attributes should be reflected in our imagery. We strive to showcase spaces that are truly special as well as being beautiful. And finally, I'll just mention the Coty Awards. Each year, we run the list of winners, accompanied by images selected by our art director to create the strongest possible layout. We choose one winning project to cover in depth as a feature, and usually cover 2 or 3 more in a shortened form. Obviously, we gravitate first to projects that have been staged and professionally shot with the idea of potential publication. If you or your client are interested in having a project published, please keep in mind the tips I've outlined above. In the end, while the story behind a project is meaningful, H&D is first and foremost a shelter magazine, and nothing matters more than the images themselves. A project may be beautiful, luxurious, and innovative, but it won't matter if it's not well shot. As I'm sure June and Greg will discuss in detail, shooting for Shelter Magazine is not like shooting for real estate purposes or even for award submissions. I want to show you our most recent cover story, which I think beautifully illustrates my point. Hang on a second. All right.
While you're getting that, Julie, I'll just remind people too, I forgot to mention this. If you have questions, you're welcome to throw them in the chat. And we'll have a Q&A time at the end, but sometimes we forget those if we don't just throw them over there. So just hit the chat feature.
Sounds good. Okay. Here's the cover of our May-June issue. Turns out this project, which was shot by Stacy Zarin Goldberg, is also the perfect opportunity for a before and after moment. I was lucky enough to find before shots of the recently redesigned home by architect Sarah Armstrong, designer Betsy DeLisi, and Pyramid Builders on Zillow not too long ago. So here's the living room. It's been shot straight on without distortion and captures both decorative and architectural features from the carved stone fireplace to the extensive crown molding. Here's a before shot of the same room. Note that the wide angle lens distorts the room's size and makes it harder to notice those details. The breakfast room is a similar story. With a table to seat 10, it's clearly very large, but it was shot with a sense of intimacy. Bright pink flowers on the table bring out the colors in the art and add visual interest. This is good styling. And here's the before shot. The wide angle lens has caused distortion, so the room looks huge. Everything is neutral, so nothing stands out.
It really is.
Yeah, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Here's the kitchen, and it illustrates the huge importance of staging for a shoot. We want spaces that feel lived in and warm, but not cluttered. In the kitchen, a vase of greenery makes all the difference, along with just enough items on the counters and shelves for the space to feel inhabited without detracting from its design. I love this kitchen. And here's the before shot. The lack of staging is on display here. We definitely don't want empty surfaces like this. And finally, here's the owner's bath, which I'm mainly sharing because I think we can all agree it is gorgeous. Rather than focusing on size, the photo focuses on all the luxurious amenities and interesting materials, including marble look porcelain slabs in the shower and a sculptural soaking tub. And here's the before shot.
Wow.
What a contrast. And that's it. That's I'm ready to take questions if anybody has them. Or no, we're waiting until the end for those. So
I'm fine either way.
All set.
Let's go ahead and see. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody else just want to go flip back and forth between those photos so you can see the difference? Because I'm like, oh, go back to the first one and back to the second.
You want me to do that?
Just for a second.
Okay.
I really, especially that one. Okay.
So the living room.
The living room was unbelievable. I kept thinking that there was going to be like drastic renovations that were going to have happened, but really it's
no, it's purely decorative. Really, the fireplace hasn't changed. None of these things have changed, but it's just so beautifully shot. Really, a lot of it is how it's shot. Right. And that's why I wanted to do this project. It's just such an example of the photography making the project. Not that it's not a beautiful project, it is, but
the photography really captures that. That really room looks so narrow there.
It does, right? Yeah, it's funny to me. I feel like the distortion that you see with this kind of photography doesn't actually flatter the spaces. So it's funny to me that it's always a thing that is done. So anyway, again, here's the dining room.
And the next one, the table, you would think it would look so, it's funny how dwarfed that table looks, first of all, but.
Right. Yeah, everything is sort of off scale wise.
Do you want us to put our questions in the chat or ask the question?
Gail, go, I vote you ask it.
Okay. So I understand you're speaking from the perspective of editorial and magazines,
Mhm.
but oftentimes before photos and realistically are the spaces are not ideal looking, and they're not staged because that's the way the homeowners live, and oftentimes it's relatable to the audience out there, so that's I'm a little confused about the need for doing such grand staging for a before photo of a space before
So
remodeling,
the
if
reason
that's
I
what you
the
say.
reason I chose real estate listing photos for the before shots was in order to emphasize the difference in the style of photography. And I don't know about you, but I think that kitchen, for example, would be more attractive for selling purposes if it were styled.
Oh, sure,
I personally think
absolutely.
so.
So you're not talking about before and after remodeling then?
No, no.
Okay,
No,
okay,
no.
okay.
This is about the photography. This is not about the projects themselves. That's sort of what I was trying to emphasize. I mean, what I was asked here to talk about today is photography. So I'm specifically focusing on that.
Gotcha. Thank
Yeah,
you. Okay.
But
sure.
that good question, Gail. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But just
And
the
again,
photography,
you
right? The photography really makes that project such a wow project, even though it's just the decorations that have changed in that one room. So imagine what the photography can do when you've renovated a space and you have that icky before photo that doesn't have all staging, and then like for your case, Gail, where you've had this project that's kind of a blank slate,
Hmm.
and then you
right.
have that wow photo afterwards.
Yes, no, I see exactly what she's saying about for specifically examples of the realtor photos. And often, but it's interesting you said that the counter should, not just be cleared, which is oftentimes what realtors say, everything cleared off. So
Yeah, I know
that's
they do. It's, and I've actually, in my personal life sold houses where they say just clear out everything, as uncluttered as possible. And I think that's true to a large degree with publication photos as well. But there's a difference between cleared off and blank or unlived in.
Yeah.
You want the space for magazine purposes. You want a space to feel welcoming and warm and all those things that you feel when you walk into a really nice room. You want to feel those when you look at the picture as well.
Mhm.
So I think
and interesting, like instead of just a blank canvas, you want it to be
totally,
interesting,
yeah,
like you were saying with the colors and whatnot.
right.
So
And I
yeah.
think, like, for example, this vase of greenery and the apples, for whatever reason, and I think the stylist and the photographer, Stacy Zarin Goldberg, knew this, somehow the injection of those green elements, those natural elements, just enhances the kitchen itself. It's
It
way
does.
better than if those weren't there.
Absolutely.
So
And does anybody's kitchen ever look that clean?
yeah, I doubt theirs does either, but it's hard to picture having such a beautiful kitchen and never doing anything in it. That's to me. I don't know.
I think it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other questions for Julie on this portion of the presentation? Well, gonna give that awkward wait time.
Okay.
All right. Well, Julie, thank you. And then, of
Oh,
course,
you're
we'd
welcome.
like you to chime in too throughout the other questions later on,
Okay.
as
Okay.
your knowledge
Yeah,
applies.
and
Okay.
people are welcome to ask me anything at any point. Sounds great.
Okay. And
Okay,
then I'm going to get you to stop share,
I will do that now.
and then we're going to tee up June.
Okay.
Okay.
And is it up?
It is. And then if you want to just go over to that play from start button on the left, it should work for you.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, I'm going to focus just on the photographs too. And actually, a number of the things that Julie mentioned, I've got in here, but this is a lot shorter, a short version of it. But anyway, basically, a couple of the things I want to talk about have to do with, number one, convincing people to have them photographed professionally, how to choose the project, and and the importance of before and after photos and staging. So we're kind of a repetition of what you had, Julie. Whoops.
And those before photos, I'm sure, June, you'll touch on how important they are
Yep.
for Cody Awards judges.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is what I hear sometimes from people, not usually NARI members, they get it, but I can take my own photos and this is kind of what you get. So they're usually not that bad, but anyway, not just for the purposes of magazines, but overall for your marketing purposes and branding your company, photos, professional photos are really important. So it's something that you can use to go to the magazines and try to get in, and you can also use it in all your other advertising and marketing if you advertise in the magazines or if you post something on social media regularly to try and promote your company and your brand. Consistently beautiful photos just really build your brand and make you look really good. And if you're consistent enough with the way you market, photos will also help you to become recognizable as a company. So it's not just your logo, but you know, everything you do in marketing, if you're consistent, will help you look very professional and brand yourself. Oops. Okay. I know this thing is, my mouse is going too fast. Okay. Next one. Okay. You include, generally, when you have a photographer do a job for you, it will include interior and exterior photos if that's appropriate. Horizontal and vertical formats, as Julie mentioned, before and after photos, high resolution images that are ideal for printing, and as she mentioned, 300 DPI. Sometimes you can take them and crop them or do different things to them as well. But generally you want to have a good variety of horizontal and vertical and different angles, which emphasize different areas of the project. I think some of that shows up in the before and afters that we just saw. You can kind of go into the room a little bit more like Stacy did in that living room with the fireplace, and that cuts it out a little bit from being such a tunnel vision photo. And also, you could, when you do that, you also help the reader focus on what you want them to notice, as opposed to, you know, this huge thing with a massive depth that looks like a bowling alley versus, you know, something that's intimately furnished like what you were showing. Horizontal and vertical formats is just an example of, you can see where the emphasis changes versus one versus the other with the same space. Before and after, if you see them lined up pretty much the same way as Julie mentioned, it's really dramatic. This is a tear down, obviously. But you can also have that in something like an example like this of a kitchen, and the angle focuses you again on, you know, the aspects of the remodel that was done. So different angles of the same space can look very different in the photos. I've noticed that in the magazine many times. You have a space and you'll have a photo of a portion of it, and then you'll have another photo of another portion of it, and you see something that makes you realize, oh, it's the same room, but it looks completely different. So different angles give you a different view of things and can make things more interesting rather than, you know, looking at something the same way all the time. And different angles can create different atmospheres, a more closed look or a more open look or a more intimate, as Julie mentioned. Angles can make the room feel larger, or they can help you to focus on a particular area, such as these. Another aspect of photos is that you can do to give yourself some variety to use is using detail shots, particularly if you've had somebody design it or stage it. it's nice to show some of the things they do. Other details, things that were possibly built in by the remodeler as opposed to being designed in, with accessories. Those kinds of things might be useful. Staging is important. Not everyone can afford to do that, but as Julie mentioned, the magazines definitely want to have that done. Even with the homeowners things, you can do some staging if you don't have a professional designer doing it for you. And also, as she mentioned, it invites you in and warms the space. It makes you want to go in there and relax and sit down. So that's a really important part of staging or arranging. If you're using the homeowner's existing furniture for the most part, then you bring in some additional things of your own, like a splash of color or some greenery. Again, you want to bring them in and make them comfortable, make them want to be there and feel like that's a place they would want to spend time. Choosing which project to use. Julie mentioned a little bit about that. And it can be anything from kitchens and bathrooms, which is a lot of what we shoot for various things, or additions, or for example, in the case on the right-hand side here, you've got a Murphy bed. There's a lot of those going in. Which project to use? You'd probably want to use something more like the one on the left that has more furniture. The one on the right is a really nice remodeling job, but there isn't anybody living there yet, so it's pretty empty. But you can imagine, you know, once you move the furniture in and everything, you'd have a lot of opportunities with the one on the right. Submit a variety of projects, different things, different styles, vignettes, you know, open spaces, whatever. Choose projects that show you at your best. I think everybody pretty much understands that. And also choose the kinds of things that you want to do more of. You know, if it's a particular type of job you like doing, if you like doing modern or traditional or mixed colors or whatever. A bit of pizzazz is never a bad thing if your customer can afford it. I think Julie was mentioning you like the high-end projects that have that. And submit a variety. I guess there are some things that they might not want to focus too much on, like the laundry room, but you know, you have things that some people do, elaborate bars or seating areas or things like that that you don't typically see. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, June. Excuse me. Thanks, June. All right. So, do we have any questions for June on her presentation?
Hi, June. It's Gail. I have
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. Did you, because you went over it and I wasn't sure, did you reference the wide angle lens that was mentioned about that we should avoid? Did you show an example of that?
The one where I showed the room without the furniture is one of those.
Okay.
I didn't specifically address that because you can use a wide angle lens and you can physically move in.
Right.
You know, use different lenses for different things.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you had said that and then you were talking about something else right after.
I think Julie mentioned that.
No, yeah, she did too. But then I
Yeah.
thought you were giving an example of it. So no, okay.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I would really recommend too, when you're doing your project entries, and we'll talk more about this in later webinars, but those before photos with the large after photo with the before photo kind of superimposed on that and smaller in the corner, even black and white versus the color, gives the judge that kind of wow moment. And as June said, shooting from those angles, and as you're going in there to do those before photos, get those from the same angles. So I don't want to take Greg's thunder because he may cover some of that, but we'll touch base on that a little bit more too. Any other questions or thoughts while we're Thinking of June's presentation? All right,
I
and
think
June,
I wouldn't mind just piping in here for a second. One thing I was realizing that I didn't cover when I was listening to Jean's, I'm sorry, to June,
It's okay.
vignette shots. We do like those. We do like smaller sort of moments that are that emphasize texture and fabric and patterns and pieces of furniture, carving, flooring, whatever. We do like those as long as they sort of are they have some context with the project. And I just wanted to mention that it doesn't always have to be a whole room shot.
Mhm.
It's good to have smaller moments as well. That's all. I
and
should have.
same with an awards presentation, kind of focusing in on those aspects that can show that you're answering one of the judges' questions, like
Mhm.
use of lighting, kind of focus in on some of that unique lighting that you've used, or the textures and design and symmetry and things like that, focusing in your pictures to kind of highlight those as well.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Anything? All right. Greg Hadley with Hadley Photography, you're up.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to say that I've been photographing here in the DC area for 25 years. I've worked on quite a few books. And I think one of the things that some photographers or remodelers forget is there's a story behind your job. Either it emanates from the homeowner or perhaps how they're going to use the space. And I think sometimes showing some of those elements um, can get you published because, and I'm going to show some examples later, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my presentation and, oh, oh, let's share my screen here. Hold on.
Thanks, Greg. And I'll tell you, there were a couple Cody projects this year that really did a good job of that storytelling. I think of Lenny with Handy Mensch. He just really captured like a trip that his clients went on and how he incorporated these relics when he got back. So I love how you can kind of tell a story of a trip or the family or whatever they're going for in their photos.
So obviously I shoot for magazines often, and I'm always trying to get the cover, and you got to have a vertical to get the cover. One of the things I would suggest if you are, been a remodeler for some time, reach out to the trade magazines and let them know that you have something special. This was a case for Chris Landis where he let them know that they were doing this, high-end solar panel stuff maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And they said, well, let's feature that as a story. And then they contacted me to shoot the cover. And I think it's important for all remodelers to make a relationship with magazines in the trade or Home and Design, for instance, which is a luxury magazine here in town, and show them stuff that's going to be coming or even the finished stuff. But I'll show you some other things where I always want to prepare myself to possibly get a cover shot. So it's nice to shoot verticals and maybe leave some open space just for that. And you can create open space in a photograph that's not there, but it's a lot easier to have it in the frame. But you can have beautiful horizontal pictures too that might not fit the cover, but there's a way to get it in there if they're creative. And this particular one, they cropped it super tight, but it shows the style of the project. This is an example of where the pictures were already in the can, so to speak. My client and Linda Barrett with Schroeder Design Build, she created the story and submitted it, and this ran in Viva Tyson's. And she pretty much put it together and they accepted it as is. So there's other ways to get your stuff, published, and it doesn't have to be the fanciest job. This was something that was shot many years ago, but this is a Sub-Zero outdoor kitchen by D. David. And this won a Sub-Zero award, was featured in their book, and was ran in some other ad space. So we staged it to make it look a little bit more lived in. And about 30 minutes later, like a tornado came through the space. We did it just right. And I would recommend not photographing homes that are unfurnished. It's better to wait. Even though this is beautiful architecture, no one's ever going to run this picture. So once it's furnished, it just has more scale. And obviously this particular house, it's a lot about the architecture and the beams. So it's not heavily styled. It could have been done a little bit more, but I think the emphasis here is a little bit more on the architecture. And so sometimes maybe taking a different point of view can, give you more variation. I was able to shoot from the balcony of the kid's bedroom. And the client here was Mark Kohler. He was crazy about these car pavilions. And, how do you feature a car parking zone? And I did it a couple different ways. And I was able to come out to this house in 4 seasons as well. But, showing the scale with the cars in and the road behind and the perfect sunlight, I thought was pretty nice. But then again, it looks good in the snow as well. So this ran as the back page for Fine Home Building. And most magazines shy away from winter scenes, but if you can get some really pretty winter scenes, oftentimes you might be one of the few to have it. But I shot this again at dusk to showcase, the whole property. And I did this in the snow as well. As you can see here, I used that one. So this is, just an architectural shot of the back. It's a little, not much going on. It has a fire pit. So maybe bring in the homeowners, have a little bit more of a human feel. And if nothing else, the homeowners would like to have the picture too. This was shot for Remodeler, where the story was, how do they use their space and how is it used for the family? So this is an actual family that lives in this house, and we staged this up and pretended to play a game. And this was used on their website and was picked up for other purposes. And it was kind of fun. I think the family had a good time. So this was a unique article where a project where this particular gentleman is a State Department, works for the Argentine embassy, and he had to have an Argentine grill. And very few people actually install these, but Mark IV took on the challenge, and it had been the first time he had done anything like this. And he asked me, how can I photograph this and make it interesting? And we came up with the idea of, let's show it in use. And that's the owner of the space. He's showing us how you cook on this particular fire by raising the meat or the vegetables separately and stoking it with wood. It happened to be August. It was about 90 degrees, but who cares, right? And so I wasn't sure how this was going to be used in a magazine. So I shot a lot of different variations of almost sequential. And then of course, you have to have a nice portrait of the owner and, show some beautiful pictures. And ultimately what happened was this ran in the Washington Post. And there's the contractor on the left and my intern assistant, and he cooked us a meal, which is also kind of a part of the story.
I was going to say, you're making us all hungry. Thank you, Greg.
This is not a great picture, but one of the things that was unique about it was the ceiling of the sunroom, and it had to be, a vertical, and that left a lot of open space in the foreground. So we decided just to dress it up with some items and make it a little bit more cozy, welcoming, because otherwise it would be it'd be a little deadly. This was shot last year for Faro and Ball, and the home furnishings are fabulous. but you kind of need a little bit more, so the flowers help. And obviously they were trying to show exact paint colors. This particular pink was a feature. And so it's more about the walls than it is anything else, but you have to frame the picture so that it's interesting. You can't just go up and shoot the cubbies all by themselves. This was a perfect example of what could have been a great cover. And you don't need to do a lot of styling in this picture because that, $50,000 Chihuly hanging light is enough. This was a house in Virginia Beach. So sometimes it's nice to see through the how the work, how the house flows. And so I think this really showcases, the depth of the house and the different areas. So this is also something that's maybe a little bit mundane for some magazines, but I'm going to bring this up that, more and more people are using their cabinets for all kinds of great spaces and hideaways. And I think it's okay to show some of that. And maybe this will not be used in a magazine, but it certainly can be illustrative of how you can utilize, your pantry. Or perhaps this is more to show that how the room is connected to the living room. They basically took out the whole wall. And that's part of the story here. But yes, it's also, she's a crazy Starbucks coffee lover. And that was part of the story and what the homeowner needed. Often you'll get a very unusual kitchen, maybe a one-of-a-kind thing. And so I think the only way to really show this top was to shoot from above. I usually don't shoot down on my kitchens, but that really helped show the offset of the counter. This is an all white kitchen. And if I didn't put any color or props in it, your eye would have no place to go except perhaps that TV, which we probably should have photoshopped out. But you need a little bit of color to draw your eye in, maybe to the left, and then maybe your eye will go over to the lemons and then back to the butler's pantry kitchen, which is behind. And often you don't need any staging if you can find the bones of the house. So this happens to be just the stairway looking up. And that's a beautiful picture. And you don't really have to put any props on this one. This was the emphasis on this house was that the guy and the husband and wife wanted a room that they could wash their dogs, feed their dogs, and there's little sleeping chambers for the dogs. And that was the impetus to start the project. What ultimately happened is this was almost a total gut of the house. And this was built for the homeowners to enjoy the view of the mountains. But it turns out it's where the dogs like to sit. And so I think sometimes having, pets or humans in the pictures really tell a different story than just the architecture. And I have to admit the dogs, I didn't have to do anything. They just jumped up in these seats. So this was featured in Home and Design's latest issue. And this was Colmark's job, and it won a Cody Award, of course, but Home and Design picked this to be their feature, what do you call it, editorial spread. So I'm just going to run through some of the pictures that were used. And so here's a case where the neighbor just happens to be a winery. So why not play it up and take advantage of that? So we dressed this outdoor table to look like you're going to have a little wine and cheese. And yes, I did photograph the closet. And this actually ran in the magazine because it's such a spectacular closet. So you never know what's going to be used. Not a lot of staging here. It's pretty dull, pretty plain, but this particular picture was also used in Home and Design, as was this. And as was this one. Now, we didn't do any staging on the kitchen because it was a little bit more about the scale and the cabinetry, and could have used some flowers instead of lemons, but it is what it is. So this is the exterior shot during the day, morning, and to be specific, but I think it'll look really good at dusk. So we waited for dusk, and it's okay. It's a little early here, but got super lucky that day. I was shooting the back of the house, and the sky turned incredible. So I ran back and shot the front again. And this is maybe 5 minutes of actual sky. And this is a single capture image, but this is something you can get lucky with if you're already there. I was shooting this picture and the sky turned like that, and I just had to run and shoot the other side too. I didn't really want to get into a whole bunch of before and after pictures because obviously you should have before and afters, and that's something that you definitely want for the Codys. Magazines like to show maybe one or two master before and afters. So it's great to have as many choices as possible. And I didn't showcase too many vignettes and tight shots, but those are definitely something you want to try to include. And I wanted to emphasize a little bit more about the fact that, yes, you can have an architectural building stand as your feature if it's good enough. And this house is beautifully designed. They ripped the whole back off and added the left wing, the terrace, and the pool. So the before picture, it was pretty basic. And I don't have access to the before picture, but certainly as a photographer, you have to think about the potential use of these pictures later and how a magazine or the web, how it can be used on the web or in a web magazine on the internet, which is where more and more of these things are going. And so the more content and the more pictures you have, the more ways you can use and get your project seen by the public. So that's my final picture. And I guess I should have stretched it over the top with that double click. Does anybody have any questions?
Great job, Greg. Thank you.
I'll go to this one. I like this one.
Yeah, and it's funny how different it looks without the dogs.
It's pretty dull without the dogs.
It is. Those blankets just don't cut it.
We were going to set it up as if two people were going to sit there and have a cocktail or a whiskey, and we did that. I didn't show it, but when we decided to put the dogs in, it was just so much better.
Yeah.
Um,
With the Colmark one, we thought you had photoshopped the sky.
Yeah.
We were like, look, I think you can see a little edge. Can't you see a little edge? I think there's a little edge of blue there, like, is the reflection in the pool? Like, we critiqued that picture so much. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with photoshopping it in, but I was like, is that real? That's crazy.
It really happened, and it lasted for about 5 or 10 minutes.
Wow.
And I know photographers that saw the same sky in New Jersey and talked about being the best evening of the whole year, and it was.
Wow.
Glad you were there.
Yeah, I think my client's pretty happy about this one.
Yeah.
So interesting note, they're getting reprints made through Home and Design. And this is a horizontal picture. We didn't shoot a vertical here, but I was able to turn it into a vertical for them. And I'll show you. It's basically,
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
whoops, sorry. Pull this up. So I turned it into a vertical by just cropping a little bit and stretching the sky. So, that's one of the things that I've learned is you can shoot the picture pretty wide and I'm always thinking maybe someone's going to put text there, or, in the bottom right of this picture, this would make a great cover. You got plenty of space for the mailing label and all the, subtext that you want.
Mhm.
So you don't have to shoot super tight.
Great. Anybody have
And-
questions for Greg?
Thanks, Greg. I don't have any questions though, but that was my favorite one was with the dogs.
I know, right? Pets,
Yeah,
pets and kids, they can make it or break it.
that was perfect.
All right, very good. So, Julie, any thoughts after seeing some of those photos, and any pointers or?
I guess, going back to vignettes, I wanted to make sure that when you say vignettes, I'm not talking about, say, a real close-up of fabric or tile. I'm talking about a picture where details are the point of it, but you still can tell what you're looking at. Like you would want it to be, a portion of the bed with a nightstand and a lamp and pretty accessories with wallpaper behind it and bedding, so that's what I mean by a vignette. I just wanted to make that clear. We don't want um, materials where there's no context to it, so you can't tell that it's part of a room, if you see what I'm saying. Does that
Makes
make
sense.
sense? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to
Thank you for clarifying,
Yeah.
because I was picturing like a close-up of a faucet, because I've seen those too when there's special tile or.
Yeah, those wouldn't be probably in a house profile. Those might, maybe in a product section, totally. And we do those. We do product sections, but yeah, for a profile in a house, you might want to do. It's a really cool farmhouse sink, and there's an interesting sort of industrial chic faucet, and you do maybe a shot of just the sink with some countertop around it, styled, and then you get a real shot of the sink and the faucet that way,
Yeah.
just
So-
a bit of a smaller detail, but I think that that the photography that makes the floor look bigger than it is and the room look longer than it is, I don't think that those pictures flatter the room. I think more realistic pictures scale wise are way more flattering to a room. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? And of course, there's a big difference in the photography you may take for your award entry and what you're highlighting there, and then still having those great pictures in your entry. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the Cody portal, it asks you for at least 10 photographs. And now they've kind of put a bullet in there for each one. Like that first one's supposed to be that wow shot. Like if it's your favorite shot of that to get the attention of a magazine, because those aren't seen. Those 10 photographs are 20 photographs really, but minimum of 10. Those are never seen by the judges. But they are seen by publications. And so that first shot is your wow shot. And then you have a before shot as the next thing, and then your company logo. And then you can do any assortment of photos you want. But just know when you're doing your entry, make that first one the one that's going to knock the socks off of the publication. Does that make sense?
Yes, I noticed that for this year that was a new change.
Yeah, I like that. And it's very helpful. It's helpful for us to get, like, sometimes your logo has been updated and we might not have that on file, but when you're putting it in there, that you're saying, this is the logo I want you to use if you publicize this somewhere. So I feel like they've made some great changes there. All right. Anything else? Any other parting thoughts? So we had considerably less folks tune in, but I will tell you what we have found is the trend is people register to get any follow-up materials and get the recording so they can watch on demand. And that's just the nature of our market right now. People cannot spare time during their workday for a presentation. So I had a couple people just reach out to me and let me know, like, I registered, when will I get the recording? So just know we would too, Debbie would like to share after this the information, if there's any special offer that you have, or any information you want to share, those specifications that you recommend, whatever you want to share, if you get that to Debbie, then when we get this recording ready to go out on our YouTube channel, we'll get a thank you email out to the participants, and then an email to those who couldn't make it. And then it'll be in our newsletter in May with a link to this presentation. So we'll get more traction on that, but you may hear from folks after the fact once they've had a chance to watch the video recording. Just wanted to kind of manage your expectations there.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you all for
Thank-
all the good information. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your nice question.
Yeah,
Thank you for
absolutely.
attending.
All right. Well, if anyone needs anything, please